Mastering with Levels, a metering and monitoring tool that helps music producers get a technically excellent mix. The home display has 6 sections labelled Peak, Stereo Field, LUFS, LRA, Dynamic Range, and Bass Space. Levels assesses your audio as it passes through. If there are no issues with your mix, the sections will glow green. If there is an aspect of your mix that needs to be fixed, the section will glow red. The 6 section icons are clickable and open up a new dedicated central display. These dedicated displays give you a relevant insight into the technical details of your mix. If an issue has been resolved, you can reset the section from red back to green by clicking the section icon. You can navigate back to this home display by clicking Levels in the top left corner. You can reset all 6 sections back to green simultaneously by clicking Reset in the top right corner. The mono button sums your dual stereo signal into one single output. This summing process can cause dramatic changes to your master. Many listeners will experience your music in mono when they're in clubs or bars. When auditioning your master in mono, it is advisable to listen through one monitor. This is because the low end can feel hyped when listening in mono through 2 monitors. Select Mono and then either the right or left buttons to limit the output to either the right or left monitor respectively. The mid button isolates the center of your stereo image. When listening exclusively to the mid channel, you might decide to make specific EQ changes to bring out individual elements in the master. You can use a mid-side EQ to make precise changes to the tonal balance of your stereo field. The side button isolates the edges of your stereo image. This can highlight if elements in your mix are sounding too harsh. It can also reveal if you have low frequencies placed too wide in your master. Peak. The central display has a true peak meter which gives you a reading of how close your track is to 0 decibels true peak. Each bar represents 1 decibel, and each preset has a threshold that we recommend you don't breach to get the best listening experience from that playback method. The goal is to keep your audio below the threshold and in the lower green half. If your audio breaches the threshold, the meter will start moving into the upper red half and it will turn the peak icon red. What is true peak metering? A true peak meter displays the absolute peak of an audio's waveform as it will be heard in the analog realm through speakers. How do true peaks affect music? Most DAWs show levels in the digital mixer using a sample peak program meter. This type of meter only shows the peak sample value and doesn't represent the true peak of the audio. The meters that we see in our DAWs make us assume that 0 decibels full scale on our output is our absolute limit. So long as we don't exceed 0 decibels full scale, our audio will sound great, right? We seem to have forgotten about the digital to analog conversion that happens when we hear our audio through speakers. Mastering using Levels True Peak Meter. The Levels True Peak Meter will give you an accurate reading of your audio's peak level. By mastering to 0 decibels true peak, you'll give your audience the best possible listening experience. LUFS. The LUFS measurement scale is extremely accurate at displaying the perceived loudness of audio material. It's a useful insight to have whilst both mixing and mastering. Navigate to these LUFS meters by clicking the LUFS icon. There is a short-term LUFS meter on the left and an integrated LUFS meter on the right. Similarly to the True Peak meter, each bar represents 1 unit. The short-term meter will display the LUFS measurement over the last 3 seconds. The integrated meter shows the accumulating LUFS level of your track. You can reset the meters by clicking on the readouts. If your material breaches your set LUFS thresholds, the LUFS icon will turn red. The mastering presets have various loudness targets. They range from a maximum of -6 to -12 LUFS. These aren't necessarily targets, more like thresholds that, if breached, could have a negative effect on your music. Why is LUFS helpful during mastering? How many times have you mastered a track, then realized it's much quieter than other tracks in the same genre? With the LUFS meters, you can make sure your track is the same perceived volume as your references. Forget RMS and peak metering for loudness. LUFS is far more accurate. Stereo field. The vector scope displays your audio's placement in the stereo field. When the image is spread out across the circle, your master is wide. When the image is simply one thin line down the middle, your master is mono. The left-right meter at the bottom of the central display area shows how even the left and right outputs are. If the pointer is central, then your music is evenly balanced between the two speakers. If you have an unbalanced output, the pointer will hover either too far left or right and will glow red. This will also turn the stereo field icon red. The correlation meter on the left side of the circle shows the degree of similarity between the left and right channels. A reading near +1 indicates a well-balanced mix. If the pointer hovers past the central point towards -1, it indicates that the mix has phase issues. This can cause the mix to fall apart when played back in mono. A breach of the stereo correlation threshold will also cause the stereo field icon to turn red. If you have issues with the correlation or left-right meter, you'll need to go back a step and fix them in the mix. Refer to the Mixing with Levels ebook for the instructions of how to fix these issues. Filter. The filter in the stereo field section allows you to isolate certain frequencies in the master to view their stereo placement. This is useful to see which frequencies are placed more centrally in the mix and which frequencies are placed wider. Having low frequencies placed very wide in your master can have negative effects. Wide bass frequencies might suffer from phase cancellation when played in mono, making your master sound weak. Bass also takes up a lot of space, so by keeping it mostly mono, you can utilize the rest of the stereo spectrum for other elements in your mix. When you engage the filter by clicking the filter button, and you set the high cut to 250 Hz or less, you can see the low frequencies that are too wide glowing yellow and red in the vector scope. The goal is to keep the low frequencies in the more central green area. This will lead to a more powerful and balanced master. If you have wide low frequencies, you could try using a stereo placement plugin to place the low frequencies of your master in mono. Dynamic range. The oscilloscope in the central display circle will react to the audio material passing through levels. The visuals will immediately show you how dynamic your music is. If your music has a dynamic range above the set threshold, the oscilloscope will glow green. If your music approaches the threshold, it will begin to turn orange. If your music breaches the threshold, the oscilloscope will turn red. Levels creates a ratio of the short-term LUFS to peak level of your track and gives you a DR, dynamic range, reading. The lower the number, the less dynamic range your track has. The dynamic range is not relative to the loudness of your music, so if your music is overcompressed, the oscilloscope will turn red regardless of how quiet the track might be. A small dynamic range can come about from overcompression and limiting. This can suck the life out of your music. It can also reduce the clarity and punch of the transients in your music. So to get a great final mix, you'll need to make sure that the dynamic range is on point. To get a more dynamic mix, look at the compressors and limiters in your session and make sure they aren't working too hard. I usually don't compress any material with a ratio exceeding 4:1. If things sound too quiet in parts of your mix, automate to get your levels and then apply lighter compression. Mastering can lower the dynamic range of your track, so it's better for your mix to be over-dynamic than not dynamic enough. Loudness range. Loudness range, measured in LU, loudness units, will tell you the statistical measure of loudness variation of your entire track. This long-term reading will give you an idea of the difference in volume between the verse, chorus, and other sections of your track. If your track has a loudness range of less than 3 LU for 30 seconds, then the section icon will turn red. If there's a big difference in loudness between the various sections of your track, then your loudness range will be a higher number. If the loudness of the various sections in your track are very similar or equal, the loudness range will be smaller. A loudness range between 6 LU to 12 LU shows that a track has a considerable difference in loudness between the various sections. Tracks with a loudness range below 4 LU could be considered rather static in loudness. As a general rule, I would recommend aiming for a loudness range above 5 LU if you wanted to create a track with tension, release, and an epic chorus that explodes out of the verse. But this suggestion can be taken with a pinch of salt. If you're aiming to create a track with a consistent energy throughout, then of course you would end up with a lower loudness range. Loudness range isn't like true peaks, where most people can agree that clipping doesn't sound good. Loudness range is subjective, and totally depends on the material you're working on. Understanding what loudness range means can help you achieve your musical goals. For example, if you felt your chorus didn't give the track enough of a lift, and your loudness range was a low reading, that might encourage you to add some automation to create a more dramatic, dynamic difference. On the other hand, if you are looking to create a track with a relentless drive or any other constant vibe, but your loudness range was over 5 LU, you might have missed the mark. I've taken the average loudness range readings from various genres to give you an idea of what you might want to shoot for in your own productions. Presets. The presets are located in the bottom left corner of Levels. Click on the text to open the drawer and select the preset that best suits the needs of the track you're working on. Settings. To access the settings, click the cog icon in the top right corner. You can adjust these sliders and save your own presets using the plugin wrapper. For example, if you want your track to peak at -6 decibels rather than the default -3 decibels, simply change the peak threshold box to -6 or use the slider. Compact view. Click the icon in the top right corner to switch to compact view. Click again to return to normal view. You can also click any of the icons to open that specific section in normal view from compact mode. Tooltips. You can enable or disable tooltips from settings. When you hover your mouse over the icon, the tooltip display will pop up. This shows you your current reading along with the threshold of the selected preset. If you've breached the threshold, the tooltip will give you mixing advice on how to correct the issue. The tooltip hover feature is also available in compact view. A piece of software will never replace an audio engineer, as a great pair of ears are irreplaceable. Levels will empower producers and songwriters of all standards to accurately assess the technical details of their mixes and masters, helping them to make more informed mixing decisions. Finally, an effective, efficient, intuitive, engaging, and accurate metering plugin. Levels.